and I lost everything. Like I had no life savings, no family. And this is the part where I either jump off the bridge or I remember all these kind of mental management techniques that I taught to snipers. And I was like, look, I just need to find the positive in all of this. And so I started changing my mindset. I was like, okay, well, I have a good relationship with my ex, which is great. I have a ton of like valuable lessons I learned in this like 4 years of me starting a business, not even knowing how to read a profit and loss or any financial statement. So I gained financial literacy. I knew how to raise money like via debt or equity. And I just started thinking totally different about the experience, and things started to look a lot better.
Welcome to the Asset Mindset Podcast. Today, we get a very special guest, Brandon Webb, Soft Rep, Crate Club, author, New York Times bestseller, keynote speaker. I could go on and on, right, Brandon? But, you SEALs don't like to brag too much, so I won't say.
I won't have no comment on that one.
But it's absolutely great to have you here. I'm honored to have you as a guest and for you to share your mindset, and we can talk about success, things in life, overcoming obstacles, all the good things that I think help people create an asset mindset and for them to be successful in life. So why don't you share a little bit about your story?
Sure. I'll try and be as brief as possible. So, I guess I'll just share my story, how I became a SEAL, and then talk about my own transition to entrepreneurship and as a writer. But I'm one of the unlikely SEALs, probably. My parents were hippies. I'm actually born in Canada, so I think I was like the first Navy SEAL that was from Canada, but I have dual citizenship. My mom is American. I grew up on a sailboat, no television, just books. I was homeschooled on and off. So it was quite a shock when, I told my parents at a young age I wanted to join the military. They just were like, where is this coming from? But I was, as a kid, because I lived on and off the family sailboat, I was at the harbor all the time. We had bought a boat in Vancouver, Canada, and ultimately sailed it down to the U.S., Seattle, and then California, where we lived on the boat for about 5 years and did a bunch of cruising in Mexico and the South Pacific. I just by being in that environment, I ended up getting a job when I was 12 years old working on a scuba diving boat for summers, basically like a gopher kid. I would do everything, like do people's laundry, fill up scuba tanks, pull the anchor. I was getting more responsibilities as I worked this boat until I was 18. But when I was about to turn 16, my father says, we're going on this huge trip to New Zealand. And I was the first time I went on a long trip with my family we spent about a year in Mexico and Baja, and it was amazing. I was 11, sailing, diving, spearfishing. But at 16, I had a good job on this dive boat. I was making good money, like many 16-year-olds or people who are about to turn 16. I wanted to get a car, my driver's license, and chase girls with my buddies. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to go on this. I didn't want to go on this trip with my dad, so I reluctantly went. We sailed from Ventura, California, all the way down to Mexico and to Acapulco, where I turned 16. And Acapulco is a jumping off point to the South Pacific because of the trade winds, and you can make one tack. So you can essentially just sail straight across. And 30 days at sea, we finally hit landfall. And I told my dad, I was like, we need to switch the main anchor on the bow of the boat for a Bruce anchor, which holds better in reef. My dad's like, yeah, you know what you're talking about. Well, first night we drug anchor, and being the humble 16-year-old, I was like, I told you so. And and about 3 weeks later, we made it to Tahiti, and my dad and I had another argument, and then he kicked me off the boat. He's like, I've had enough of your shit. Maybe you should leave. And you didn't want to go in on this trip anyway. Maybe it's best if you call your old boss and see if you could get, a spot on the boat. And so I did. I called Bill, who owned the dive boat piece, it was called, out of Ventura Harbor. And I say, Bill, can I get my job? And he's like, yeah, I'd finished my junior year already on independent studies. So I looked on this message board in Tahiti, and there was like a catamaran sailing to Hawaii, and said, I went and interviewed for the job, and I got it. And I grabbed the backpack and $100, and off I went. And I've been on my own ever since. So, um, I got back. I flew Comair back to California, back to LA from Hilo, Hawaii, finished school. And originally, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Like that was my whole
Hmm.
dream. But because of my diving experience, and then practically speaking, I realized my grades weren't that great. I wasn't going to make it into the Naval Academy. I was on my own. I didn't have money for college. I really didn't know about the ROTC. Was kind of intimidated by the process and ended up reading a book, Rogue Warrior by Dick Marcinko, the
Mm.
guy who created SEAL Team 6. And I was like, wow, I can do this. This is challenging. And it's kind of my way out, And the owner wanted to make me a dive boat captain, but I was like, no, that's not the life for me. Um, and so I joined the Navy. At the time, you couldn't join directly to the SEALs. You had to take, I think it's similar like the SF and the Army. You have to do a regular job in the Navy, then you could apply for SEAL. So that's what I did. I was an air crew, search and rescue, swimmer, and sonar operator in H-60 helicopters. Did two deployments on aircraft carriers, one on the Abraham Lincoln, one on the Kitty Hawk. And then finally they let me go to SEAL training because my first package was denied. They're like, we need you. This is an undermanned job in the Navy, and we're not going to let you go. And I'm like, son of a bitch. So, but of
Yeah.
course I said, I'm not going to re-enlist unless you send me to BUDS, which is a
Yeah.
SEAL training selection. So I went to BUDS in 98, graduated with class 215. We like 23 of us made it out of 220 something. Went to SEAL Team 3, which was my first choice. At the time, before 9/11, the only two teams that were really getting work were Team 4, which was responsible for South America. So they're doing a lot of like counter drug operations. And SEAL Team 3, because we're responsible for the Middle East. And they were doing a lot of like non-compliant ship boardings, like boarding those ships that were smuggling oil out of Iraq under the UN sanctions. That's when Saddam Hussein was still in power. So I wanted to work. I was like, I don't want to, join to be a weekend warrior. I want
Yeah.
to do the job. So I went to 3. I did 2 platoons there. Um, both platoons were great. My first platoon was with Glenn Doherty, who was one of my best friends. He died in Benghazi. He was one of
Hmm.
the SEALs that died in that movie 13 Hours. If anyone's seen that, it was an amazing platoon. I got back, had planned to stay in Gulf Platoon, but wanted to reenlist tax free. And the ops boss Kevin said, "Look, I'll only let you go to the Middle East, and which is a tax free zone, if you go to this platoon, Echo Platoon." And everybody knew. I don't know if you've experienced this in the ODA, but Echo Platoon was like the worst platoon as SEAL Team 3. Like everybody knew about Echo Platoon. I was like, fuck, not that platoon. They had just they just failed their ORE, which stands for Operational Readiness Exam, which is like a final mission to certify
Yeah.
you to deploy. And Kevin was like, look, we're rebuilding the platoon. It's kind of a shit show, but you're a good guy, and I want you to be part of the rebuild, and you'll get to re-enlist. I probably wouldn't have done it and switched, but I had my first son was on the way, and I like an extra 10,000 or $7,000, whatever it was, in tax savings was huge for me, as an
Yeah.
E5. And so I made the deal, instantly regretted it. I remember we were doing a fast rope. I was like this in the second helo, the first rope goes down, and one of these guys, which we ended up shit canning later, he ropes down, and I see his gun isn't clipped into his H harness. The gun, his MP5 actually tumbles and falls on the deck of this boat. And I was like, this is like the fucking Keystone Cops. And he like picked up the gun, like luckily it didn't go in the water. He picked it up and ran off. And I remember
Oh.
during the debrief, I was like, "Hey, who was that dropped the gun?" And my chief was like, what?" But anyway, that's a whole nother story for a different day. But I ended up going to war with this platoon, and because 9/11 happened, and I missed the birth of my son. He was born on my Afghan deployment, November 30th, 2001. I came back, was a sniper instructor, an advanced sniper instructor. Then I got recruited to come down to our basic sniper program, which was going a massive overhaul, not only in the technology that we use, but also the way we taught. We were teaching more like a Marine Corps style course where it was kind of like a boot camp environment. We're yelling at the guys, and it was sink or
Mm.
swim mentality. And fortunately enough, we had a lot of budget because of 9/11 to bring in the best kind of performance coaches. And this part of my career made a huge impact on me, and I think saved me in my transition, or at
Mm.
least helped me tremendously because there was a big focus on positive mindset and positive teaching over negative teaching. And that's as simple as when you're teaching somebody or coaching or even with your children, when you point out all their mistakes, especially when they're a beginner, you're just programming them for failure because they don't even know, right? So as a sniper example, if I'm telling like Johnny Kim, who's now an astronaut, who was one of my students, if I say, Johnny, you're flinching, stop flinching. Well, now all he's thinking about is flinching. His partner's thinking about flinching. And anyone that heard me say this is thinking about flinching. And I'm giving like the whole class a conflict rather than just give them the corrective input, right? Like, hey, Johnny, calm down, take a deep breath, make a nice smooth trigger pull. Same kind of desired outcome, but very different way to get the outcome. And positive always wins over negative. So we did things like visualization techniques, how to push out negative self-talk. So we're teaching this to like the sniper students, and a lot of them, I remember the first class, they didn't buy into it. I was giving my students like tapes on visualization, and everyone was giving these my students a hard time because you have like four students assigned to each instructor, like your instructor student mentor program we had. And my students at the first shooting tests were the first ones to score perfect hundreds. They did 100, 100, 95, 100 on both the snaps and movers and unknown distance tests because they each had to shoot, one has a spot. And
Yeah.
then everybody wanted those tapes or the CDs after that, back when we had CDs. Um, but it was amazing because also we had almost a over 20% failure rate. And when we made these changes, the way we taught as a positive over negative, we taught them all these techniques that were used at the top levels of sports and the Olympics. The graduation rate went to, or the failure rate went to zero, almost zero, and just stayed there. Like it was rare for us to fail a student
Hmm.
at that point, and it was instantly. And that really left an impact on me, and how I think about life and the all the adversity that everybody faces. No one really gets out away scot free. And in how I like raise my kids too. I'm writing a book on parenting right now because I use these mental management techniques on them. But so at this point in my career, I don't know what you call it in the Army, but the Navy you call it sea duty and shore duty, and a sea duty is like a super high tempo operation. Well, the instructor tour was considered sea duty, and I'd given up my shore tour, which is like a cushy SEAL instructor job. You work like 3 days a week and finish with your master's degree. I'd given that up to be a sniper instructor because a guy from SEAL Team 6, Bob, recruited me. And then when I got down there, Bob promoted me and retired. And he's like, here's the keys to the course. He's like, I'm making you the course manager. And I'm like, oh my God, which was an incredibly rewarding job. But I was burned out. When it came time for me to re-up, I extended a year. And then I said, you know what? I'm burned out. And
Yeah.
so I decided to leave in 2006. I did a little bit of contracting, but it was mainly focused on entrepreneurship. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs and became successful on their own accord later in life, but I knew I wanted to be my own boss. I had you know, my first startup crash and burn in the 2008 financial crisis. Same time my wife was like, hey, I don't want to be married to you anymore. Like you put me through hell as a SEAL and now this entrepreneurship is like just as bad. So I was like no wife, kids are, I was left alone in a house all by myself in San Diego. Kids and wife moved away, lost my entire life savings. I had invested in apartments because when I was on my instructor tour, and I had about $500,000 saved up for a new chief E7, quite a bit of money in the
Hmm.
military, and I lost everything. Like I had no life savings, no family, and this is the part where I either jump off the bridge or I remember all these kind of mental management techniques that I taught to snipers, and I was like, look, I just need to find the positive in all of this, and so I started changing my mindset. I was like, okay, well, I have a good relationship with my ex, which is great. I have a ton of like valuable lessons I learned in this like 4 years of me starting a business, not even knowing how to read a profit and loss or any financial statements. So I gained financial literacy. I knew how to raise money like via debt or equity, and I just started thinking totally different about the experience, and things started to look a lot better. And so at this time, I was also writing for magazines, and the seals were just starting to become popular, mainly because you got Luttrell wrote Lone Survivor, and then I think that book did really well, and then for whatever reason, the seals just started becoming all over the place in the media, right, with these high profile raids from count back from the Bin Laden mission. It was the Captain Phillips rescue, all these other things, and it was like seal, seal, seal. So everybody, if you had and I was like one of the few SEALs, like me, Chris, and Luttrell, we got out kind of mid-career, and so our peer group was still active duty, um, and we were able to do very well with the books that we wrote. Um, but I was writing for magazines, and then someone said, "Oh, you should write a book." And then Luttrell was like, "Man, you got a crazy story. You should write a book about your time kind of into the SEAL team." So I ended up getting an agent, which took a while, and then sold the book for a nothing advance. And then the book did really well. That was the Red Circle. Um, and at the time, I had to get a real job. I lost my first business. I went to work for L3 for 2 years to kind of build back my nest egg. And then as the book was doing well, I was blogging for military.com and running a gear blog for them. And I was like, you know what? I think there's all this interest in the world of special ops. Let me start a site. And that was SoftRep. And SoftRep was initially started just to be a culture blog, like talk about the missions and the training and the weapons. But what I found out was I had an Army SF guy that was, and one of my first writers, who was a great writer, Jack Murphy. He was like, "Hey man, I just saw this thing on CNN and they got it totally wrong. Like that's not what happened in Afghanistan." And so he would write it up,
Hmm.
and we started breaking news. And then the New York Times is calling us, like, "Who the hell are you guys? How do you know this?" It's just like we had all this insider access and sources that from our military experience that would take a reporter like 20 years to develop. And so that was when SoftRep turned into a news site, and then I had to figure out, okay, how do I ethically run a news site? Because we used to even do satire. Like I don't know if everyone's seen the Duffel blog, but they have some funny stories, right? But I realized you can't be an onion and then report the real news at the same time. People are gonna freak out. Um, so yeah, SoftRep, I still run that today with a few other sites. It's 13 years. I started the Crate Club, which you mentioned. That was an e-commerce site. I sold that in the pandemic because we had massive like supply chain issues. Learned a lot of lessons in that business. It was a great business. There's times I wish I still had it. But yeah, that's my story. My kids are grown in college. I have a son he has a tech startup with artificial intelligence. My daughter's about to graduate from Goldsmiths in London, which is a design school, and my youngest just graduated high school. And the kids are amazing, and their mom is a great mom. We've developed a really good, like, positive co-parenting relationship. I get along with her husband, so it's been a challenging ride all around. Like we've all, as parents, we've faced everything, drugs, all sorts of shit. But Um, we have amazing kids, so I'm really thankful for that. And yeah, have a good life. So I to finish it up, I moved to Portugal 2 years ago. I still go to New York, but I'm here in Lisbon largely because I get asked all the time why Lisbon. Portugal has a tax treaty with America, and it's like a lot of people they live in a tax-friendly state because they don't want to pay state income tax. Well, Portugal, I don't pay any state income tax. I just pay my federal tax, and that's it. So it's a tax-friendly environment. The weather's great, and dollar goes far here. So I'm like really happy with Portugal. And yeah, that's my story.
That's an amazing story. Absolutely amazing.
That's my
And I'm
intro.
sure, yeah, I was gonna say that's quite the intro. So imagine the full thing. You need to read the book, Red Circle.
Yeah,
You'll get
thanks.
more. But yeah, absolutely. Anybody that's listening, please pause, go in the descriptions, check more out on Brandon. We'll have all the links to his books, links to SoftRep, all the wonderful things if you want to dive deeper. The thing I would like to dive in with you is you have seen a lot of different obstacles, challenges in life,
Yep.
military wise, family life, business life. So I talk about people that are successful have this certain mindset and take ownership. I deem it the asset mindset. Can you share overcoming those military challenges, those life challenges? What are you able to do in your mind that's different from a lot of people that would break them? So can you share your techniques or your habits
Yeah,
or what it is?
yeah. I mean, I think early on, and really like leaving home at 16, and I was scared. Like, I talk about it in the Red Circle. I cried myself to sleep the first 3 nights, like terrified. Like, what the hell did I just do? I'm on this strange boat away from my family, sailing to Hawaii. But I think at you realize that it kind of builds resilience. Oftentimes, and I talk about this. I wrote a book called Mastering Fear. The stories and the scenarios we invent in our heads are often 10 to 100 times worse than actuality, right? So I was fortunate enough to learn a lot of these lessons at a very young age. So I think early on when people would tell me, I mean, I don't know if you experienced this, when you say it's good, I think very good thing to have your goals and actually state them out loud. And when you tell people, I want to try to become a SEAL, man, I would say 90% of the people I interacted with who I actually really cared about, they were like, that's impossible. Why are you going to do that? And I'm like, wow, like thanks for the words of encouragement there. Like,
Yeah.
and there were very few people who actually believed in me. And so I think one of the things that helped me is I believed in myself. And sometimes, look, you can love somebody, they could be a good friend or family member, and who knows what the hell is going on in their heads, and they're dealing with their own insecurities, or maybe sometimes they're coming from a position of care. But a lot of times you find yourselves in these situations. Maybe it's a career change. You want to give up your 9 to 5 and buy a franchise or go into business. People will just shit all over you,
Mhm.
and like people that matter to you. And so it's tough to take that. I remember similar to, I just watched that SpaceX documentary on Netflix. I mean, here, Elon Musk, like, it took over 20 years for SpaceX to be successful. You had Buzz Aldrin, which is the first man on the moon, testifying in Congress how Elon was out of his mind in a farce for wanting to re-land a first stage rocket. He's like, impossible. This is never going to work. So imagine like a guy like that who had to go through all that stuff where, how tough it must have been for him, but he just believed. And I think that's something that really sometimes you have to believe in yourself. I mean, I think it's important to surround yourself with really good people. I think that's, most people know that by now, like you are who you hang out with. But sometimes you got to just realize, hey, I have what it takes and I got to believe in myself. So I think that was a big one. Um, I think back to my challenges in the military. I had a really terrible boss in as a SAR swimmer.
Mhm.
I thought, my philosophy, and I still believe in this, is whatever job you do it to the best of your ability and make a good impression on day one and on the last day. Like through that whole period. Like we've all been in these jobs where people come in and they do a good job the first week and they start slacking off, right? The one thing I learned as a SEAL is you got to earn it every day. Because I saw guys that were in the SEAL teams 4 or 5 years. Even my swim buddy, he had a bad day and lipped off as a new guy, and he got sent back to the fleet. And he had to go through SEAL training all over again. So it made a big impression on me. I was like, okay, you got to really like bring your A game every day. You just can't slack off. Um, but I remember the first time before I was a SEAL, I was applying to be a SEAL my second time, and my philosophy was like, okay, I'm just going to do the best job I can. I'm going to get all the qualifications, and then that kind of backfired on me because I had this jerk boss, which sometimes we get. You get a really bad boss, and this guy was from the South. I was stationed on the West Coast. He hated West Coast guys, like would make fun of us publicly with his Alabama accent. And he played favorites. I remember this guy Mendoza in my shop. We used to do logs and records. So my secondary duty is I had to put in the flight hours in everyone's logbooks. And me and this guy Mendoza were, and I'm like, dude, I just did all my work in an hour. Like, why are you still doing this? Well, Chief thinks I'm working hard. So he's just dragging it out, right? And I'm like, what the hell? But anyway, I end up getting my evaluation. I was an E4, and I was friends with somebody in admin. This guy, he told me at lunch, he's like, hey, dude, you're getting screwed on your eval. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're getting this, you've been here like 2 years or almost 3 years, and you're getting the same eval as like this new check-in who's an E4. And I was like, are you kidding me? It's like, because I had all the qualifications. Like, I had more quals than a lot of E5s and E6s in the squadron. And so I was like, that's bullshit. So I actually wanted. I remember I got the eval. This does have a happy ending, and you'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it as a fellow military guy. So I read my eval, and there's a little box that says you could submit a statement. So I signed it and checked the box, and my chief didn't even notice. But 2 days later, he calls me in the office. He's like, Petty Officer Webb. He's like, what the hell are you doing? He was like, the commanding officer is asking me for your statement for your evaluation. And I was like, yeah, I have it right here. And I handed it to him, and he was just turning all shades of red and purple. So we get called in together to the commanding officer.
Nice.
His name was Rosa. He had just taken over, and Rosa was the kind of boss you want to go to war with, right? So
Nice.
Rosa calls me to the office. He puts my eval in front of Chief Carnley, and he says, Chief, like, I've read Petty Officer Webb's statement. Now, what do you have to say? And he started mumbling and stuttering. He couldn't get a coherent word out. And Rosa, I remember, looked at me, and he's like, Petty Officer Webb, I don't know how to tell you this, but your chief maybe doesn't know how to write your eval. So he slid a blank eval. He's like, you go ahead and fill it in for yourself. And I was like, and I couldn't believe it, because being a chief in the Navy is a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
And for the commanding officer to do that was like unheard of. And I was like, so I filled in my own eval, and man, I had orders to buds like the next day. Like, that chief couldn't wait to get rid of my ass. But that taught me, because when I wrote my statement, I just addressed the facts. I took the emotion out of it, and I was like, look, this is the mark. It says 4.0 for a 4. This is back when we were on the 4.0 eval system. Now I think it's 5.0. I said, this is what it means, and here are my accomplishments, and just kept the facts. But it really taught me important lessons. Sometimes you got to stand up for yourself, and you can't let emotion get in the way. If you think that facts are on your side, sometimes you got to stick up for yourself. So that was a time, fortunately, it paid off, and then it did later on in my career when I was a sniper course manager at a very similar situation. But that's an example. In business, I was fortunate, like I said, when I had a really big setback, losing everything. It was the mindset of a positive mindset over negative. I mean, those negative thoughts always creep in, right? We never can get rid of them. But to take some time and really learn some tools, and then there's plenty of books out there. With Winning in Mind is a great book. One of my mentors, who's a gold medalist, Lanny Basham, he was an Army AMU guy, won the gold medal. He used that technique on his own techniques on himself to win gold after he lost his first big Olympics in Munich. Um, it's positive, choosing the positive over the negative, because it's easy to kind of get in that negative feedback loop. But those mental management techniques that I learned and taught to the SEAL snipers, and used on my own kids, used on myself, like that's a big reason I think I've had a much better transition than a lot of my peers, because I always look for the positive. And I'm telling you, like, I've been through a lot of shit, man. I've had people steal from me. I had my last controller embezzle $300,000. I had the guy ahead of my product procurement was a Marine Corps guy, very squared away. I served with him in Iraq on a contract for OGA. He had a drug problem, got hooked on drugs through the VA, ended up ordering $2 million worth of worthless fucking product that was just sitting in my warehouse. And then, I let him go with this big fat severance because I'm like, I cared about him. I'm like, dude, get your life together. The day that severance ended, he went on social media and just shit all over me. And I remember Dakota Meyer, who's a mutual friend.
Yeah.
Dakota called me. He's like, "What the fuck?" Blah blah blah. And I'm like, "You don't realize, man, this guy has serious problems." And he's like, "Whatever," because the guy they're both Marines. So,
Hmm.
and Dakota called me a couple weeks later to apologize because he's like, "I had him to my house in Texas. It was a disaster. He's doing drugs in front of my children." And I was like, "I told you so, man." But that guy was a major reason I had to sell the Crate Club, because I was in the whole 2 million. COVID comes along, and our net 60 terms, that means like I'm buying, say, you know, how many, we had 20,000 subscribers. So I'm buying like a lot of knives, right? So I'm cutting a check for like $500,000 for some knives to put in this month's box.
Hmm.
And I was getting that. So I would order the knives and have 60 days to pay for the knives, right? And that was how our business cash flow model worked. But now COVID comes along, so net 60 turns into, hey, I actually want money up front for the product. I was like, well, our business doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So, and I'm 2 million in the hole with product I can't use. So I sold it to our competitor BattleBox, and thankfully they're doing a great job carrying on the business. But it's just, I've been through a lot of shit, but you have to keep a positive mindset. And then shortly after that, finding out my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness. So my repayment from my controller is when I took off for a year to spend time with my father. This guy steals 300K from me, like micro embezzlement from PayPal. So I was just like, you got to be kidding me, man. So, and then you talk to any entrepreneur that's been around long enough, or business owner, this stuff isn't like new. Like
Hmm.
we've all had to deal with this stuff. But I would tell you this, like being a business owner and entrepreneur, I've been way more stressed out than I was in combat. At least in combat, it's just you. It's you doing a job good and caring about your teammates and trying not to get shot, right? So
Yeah, it's
I've,
so much simpler. People
yeah,
don't understand. It's
yeah, way
so
simpler.
much. I have to
Yeah,
live through the day and don't let any of
yeah,
my buddies die. Okay,
yeah,
got it. That's
way,
my
yeah.
mission.
Yeah, way easier. I'm not losing sleep on how to make payroll this month. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think I answered that question.
Yeah, no, you did great. I'll share a quick one of my stories that you said it just brought back.
Yeah,
When you talk guys like ourselves, I hadn't thought of this in years, but you're talking about your A game, and every day you have to show up and earn it. So I'm a cherry, brand new in my company. I'm walking in, and there's a sergeant first class, so and so. I won't embarrass anybody's name here, but it's in the hallway, and I'm like, hey, where's this going? Do I need to help or what? They're like, oh no, he just got kicked off the team. I'm like, whoa, an E7? I'm
yeah,
a lowly E5 and just show, I'm like, ooh, I better keep my shot group type. If they kick off a sergeant first class, just like all his stuff was in the, I don't know exactly what happened because I was the cherry and I kept my mouth shut and didn't ask too many questions. But yeah, there's standards. And if
yeah,
you want to play in certain circles or teams, you need to step up and continually work every day and try hard.
yep. That
So,
guy who dropped the MP5, actually, when we were in in Oman, Jordan. I remember Admiral Harwood is he was a captain then. He was our Commodore. He's definitely an admiral now, but he found out about that and that this guy we were prepping our Humvees to go into Kandahar, and he was off like fucking around flirting with some army girl, and my chief was livid, and my chief was like, 5'4", full of piss and vinegar, and actually was one of the SEALs that blew up Noriega's boat in Panama, like one of the
Oh,
dive pairs. Just a kind of a legend in the teams, and Chris was livid, and the Commodore was like, "Hey, you have a problem with this guy? We send him home right now." And the guy was an E6, packed his shit back, pulled his seal pin, and off you go. So similar circumstances, and it does make, and this is a good lesson in any type of organization. That's a positive signal, right? Like if
mm-hmm.
a negative signal would be letting someone like this continue on, because what message does that send to the rest of the team? It's like, well, if he can get away with it, maybe I can just slack off on this, and why put in the extra effort? And so these are, and I went after I had that crate club sale, I went back to business school at Harvard, and they talked about signaling like this, and it's super important for any organization, even a family. Like you have to have positive. There's positive signals and negative signals, and you need to make sure you're signaling in a positive way to let everyone know this is the kind of behavior that gets rewarded, and this is the kind of behavior that has consequences.
Yeah, I preach that all the time in parenting with all my kids, even my 6-year-old right now. I'm like, cause and effect. What's that? You do
Yeah,
good things, you get good things. You do bad things, you get bad stuff. Like
yeah, bad things
it's
happen. Yeah,
yeah, like bad things, and it can be at any level. We have farm animals, and bad things happen. This happens. Well, a door was left open. Somebody didn't do their job. Well, some ducks died, and you explain to the
yeah,
kids, and there's real consequences. So I also just really love how you talk about the positive continually. You are sharing that. I talk about that in the asset mindset, how you have to be a page master, like turn the page in your mind when you're focusing on
yeah,
that negative thing. You have to shift and focus to something positive. Because if you're still breathing and you're still alive, listeners, there's something positive in your life that you can look
yeah.
at. There always is. Don't get stuck on the negative. And please take a moment to pause, subscribe if you like what we're talking about. Follow us on all the social medias, YouTube. Please check out everything Brandon's got going on and follow him as well. We have everything in our details. So check that out and share this positive message with people that need it, because we all know we need a little more positivity and love in the world.
Oh yeah.
So I got to say again, this shift that you have and able to always go to the positive. Is there any techniques? Like I've heard people say like, oh, I'll think of 6 things, or, oh, I'll do this or that, or I'll reframe. What do you do when that negative thing comes about? Because it does to everybody.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, I mean, now today, I have as a habit, it just happens, right? But it wasn't always this way. Like, I remember when I was going through the divorce and had the business failure, I had to actually write a mantra. Like, okay, I had to remind myself of the good things, and that was as simple as like putting it in my phone and reading it every morning. Like, I am this, I've accomplished this, I'm a good dad, all the positive things, and a little bit of like aspirational stuff in there as well. And if you just pound that into your head, I had sticky notes in the bathroom mirror, so I'm like shaving, reading this stuff, and
Sticky
that's what
notes.
it, yeah, that's what it takes to kind of imprint, like do a positive imprint. And sometimes you have to just hammer it into your own head, and eventually, you start changing the way you think. Now it just comes naturally to me. um, and I wrote another book called Mastering Fear after teaching my really close friend Kamal, who was a successful venture capitalist and an author as well. His brother Naval Ravikant, a lot of people know Naval because he created AngelList and he's kind of a Silicon Valley guru. Um, hate that I said that, but it's true. Everyone loves Naval. Um, but I taught Kamal how to swim in a week. And this is a guy that had never swum in his life and was like panicked in any water situation. And it had just like been like, man, Brandon, can you help me get over this? Can you recommend a swim school? I remember he was telling me he was helping Tim Ferriss edit Tools of Titans in New York, and there was like a pool party, and he was really like embarrassed to get invited to swim, and he's like, "No, I don't. I can't swim." Like a guy in his 40s saying that. So
Hmm.
um, I said, "Look, man, let me teach you." And at first he was like, "No way, dude! Like you're just gonna throw me in, tie my hands and legs up like those SEAL videos." I was like, "No, man, let me just start. We're gonna take small steps." And I used the kind of same mental management techniques that I learned as a sniper instructor and used them on Kamal. And he's like, "Dude, you changed my life." It's like I can swim now, and I remember on Monday a guy that was terrified of the water, and on Friday doing cannonballs in the pool. Um, and he was like, "You changed my life." He's like, "You got to write a book about this." So I wrote Mastering Fear, and I have a lot of techniques as well in there. But the big ones are what I shared, right? You just got to sometimes pound it into your own head to shift your mindset. But the good news is once you make a habit of it, you don't even have to do that. It naturally comes in my head. And sometimes, I think about bad things that can happen, and I'm like, okay, where's the positive in this? Like, how am I going to reframe this
Yeah.
in a positive way for me and my friends and family? Because it's just the way my mind works now, it's proven like over and over again. Um, it's so important, especially with kids. I read somewhere there was a study that for every like one negative input a kid has in his life, whether it's a well-meaning teacher that says something fucked up or a coach, it takes like five positive things to wipe that one out. Like they did a big research study. So
Wow.
it's so important to it's you have to be a realist, but at the same time, like, developing a positive mindset and then realizing sometimes we carry our own bullshit with us. I remember another story when I was taking my kids skiing in Squaw Valley. My son Grayson has always been like kind of he's the baby of the family. He's been the kind of the rebel. He was 5 and he didn't want to ski like the rest of us. He wanted to snowboard. And here he is about to just hop in this huge mud puddle. And I'm about to scream at him. I'm like, no, I just bought you new ski gear for Christmas. But then I stopped myself in my head and I was like, who cares? Like, if that's fun to him, why do I give a shit? He's going to hop in this mud puddle. Like, why? Why am I stopping him? And I was like, dude, knock yourself out. And he's like smashing all over, laughing. We all started laughing. And I'm like, but it's like a small example of how parents can sometimes just quickly react to something that's really silly and like force a kid to not do it, right? And it's like, really, what the hell does it matter? That this kid is going to jump in the freaking, let him jump in the mud puddle,
Yeah, it's a
Who
kid being
cares?
a kid. Let them have their
Yeah,
childhood.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like the saying, I don't know, you might have heard this, when you have children and they start making you mad, fast forward to your 80-year-old self and then watch that kid do that. And would you yell at them, or would you just be in admiration and grateful for the time you had together?
Yeah.
And
No,
I'm like, wow,
that's
that was very powerful as parenting. So I try and do that, sometimes when I see behavior or things going on, or like, oh, you're making a mess. And then I'm like, you know what? Do I really care about that mess?
yeah.
Look how happy you
That
are. Look at the
the kind of
crafts you're doing.
yeah, that applies to many things, right? It's like, what does your 80-year-old self think about this, or what would you, have wished you had done, before your 80-year-old self? But that's a super powerful one. The other thing, and I don't mean to turn this into a parenting podcast, but
It's
the
fine. It's mindset.
the
It's all of it.
the real and this applies for life. And I actually learned this at business school because I considered myself a good negotiator before I went to business school, and then I realized how complex a negotiation process is. And one thing we did was map everything out. So just take a simple real estate transaction and think about all the parties that are involved in buying a house, right? You have
Mhm.
yourself, maybe your wife, so those two parties on one side, the sellers, which may be one or two people, their agent, your agent. So that's like, 6 people with all different motives and ideas and motivations, right? Like, and you have to like, have you ever like even in a real estate transaction, mapped out the motives and incentives, because that's important for agents, because they just want the commission. They don't give a shit
Hmm.
about you. They want to close that deal and get their commission. Um, and so map it all out and list out, and sometimes you have to guess, like, what are the motivations of the seller? Do they want more money? They want to close fast, maybe take less money. Map it all out, and then draw a line and where the price is, and then figure out, okay, this is my absolute highest number that I'm going to pay for this house, and this is my bottom line where I'd like to be, and then somewhere in the middle is this like zone of possibility, right? But people don't even do that in these. They're the basics of most negotiations. So, and there's much more to it. And one of the best books I've read on negotiation is Never Split the Difference. And I'll tell you, I was an ass about it. I looked at that book and I'm like, what does some FBI guy know, right, about negotiation? And boy, was I humbled. When I read it, it was also a reminder, like, get out of your own bullshit sometimes. That book was incredible. But my point is, I remember I was writing a chapter in the parenting book I'm working on now, on discipline. And I remember my youngest got suspended from school. My ex called me. We had this conversation. It was all about, okay, we're going to drop the hammer on this kid, right? Like, how can he get thrown out of middle school, seventh grade? This is terrible. And we were ready to throw the book at him. And I don't know if it was me or my ex, but we had this amazing psychologist that helped us through our divorce. But I think it was me that said, look, maybe let's talk to Dr. Baker and see if she has any coaching techniques. And so she was like, look, your son is like, he's, between 12 and 15. It's one of the toughest times for boys. They're going through puberty. She's like, you need to get to the root cause of this behavior. And so when and we're like, no, that's great advice. So we
But what's
actually
the
were
root
like,
cause?
well, yeah, well, because you hear suspended and you want to drop the hammer on the kid, right? So I actually flew to Oregon and sat down. I was like, what's the problem, buddy? Like, what's going on? And it turns out, after we peeled the layers of the onion back, he had his homeroom teacher had embarrassed him terribly in front of the whole class. And so he had this like antagonistic relationship with the homeroom teacher. And this woman was a nightmare. Like, we found out she had, you know, half a dozen complaints against her. The principal even said, yeah, she's kind of difficult, but I have no choice. We're shorthanded teachers. She had, I'll tell everyone, she had him stand up in front of the class and started berating him for being a victim of white privilege. And this is a white woman yelling at like a 12-year-old kid, embarrassing him in front of an entire class. And so, of course, this kid's going to act out, right?
Hmm.
Ordering Uber Eats pizza to the classroom like Spicoli in Fast Times at Richmond. I mean, he got suspended. And I was like, at the end of it, when the dust settled, his mom and I took his side. We pulled him out of school, homeschooled him for a year, and then put him in a different school. And he went from F's and D's to like B plus average, and just graduated, got into University of Oregon. But so now I love checklists because I'm a pilot and a SEAL, right? So and military guy. So I'm like, at the end of this chapter, I give a little detailed checklist. Like, here are the things. Like, are you having emotional reaction? Yes or no? Like, give this like parent checklist so they can take all the emotion out of it and get to like the root cause of the situation. And I think this applies in many things, right? Like, in life, when something blows up, a relationship, it's a good analytical tool to kind of reset and make sure that you're approaching things from like a centered emotional state, because it's so easy as a parent to just blow up and want to throw the book at these kids. And in reality, we could have pushed our son away. He could have got into drugs. He could have went a
Hmm.
totally different path. But we like pulled him in close and said, "Okay, son, what's the problem? Like, really, what's bothering you here?" And when he told us this and we verified it, I was like, "You got to be kidding me! Like, what teacher says this to a 12-year-old boy, in front of an entire classroom of kids?" So anyway, parenting rant over.
Yeah, no, that's good. But that you're leading into the facts of step back, be objective, communicate, assess. I tell people stop all the time when I'm trying to
Yeah,
help them.
yeah,
Stop, think, observe, plan. Then plan. Don't do knee jerk reactions. Don't get emotional, let your emotions run wild with things. Yes, acknowledge your emotions, acknowledge the other person's emotions, but don't let them make the decision. Use your brain, step back, observe. And that's what you did. You said it right there, like, hey, peeling back the onion, and
Yep.
you found the truth. And then what happens when you get to the truth? Then you can deal with it. Otherwise, you're never going to fix the problem. So that's great. And I think that's a fantastic tool, a checklist for people. It just keeps it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
checklists
exactly.
too, man. I was the engineer log guy on my ODA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, check,
Nice.
we got this, we got that, we
Oh yeah, yeah.
got.
Used to
So,
carry on
fantastic.
those. You're in my generation, man. The little green books, right?
Oh,
We
yeah,
got.
yeah. Green book. Yeah, yeah. We're born very close. Yeah. You're 74. I'm
Yeah,
75. So, I'm
yeah,
turning 50.
yeah. Nice,
So,
man.
yeah. But, man, this is fantastic. Things are going great and quick. I don't want to cut it off yet, but, we are coming to the end. So please like, follow, subscribe, The Asset Mindset, share, check out Brandon Webb and all the stuff he's doing, Soft Rep, check out his book, Red Circle, and go in the description. You'll find all the information you want. But before we go, I'm going to ask you to leave one nugget, one solid nugget that you would like to share that you've learned in all your coaching, sniper stuff, parenting, whatever. What would be the one technique or maybe habit that you'd like the audience to gain and be aware of?
I mean, honestly, we talked about it quite a bit, but I think, you know, always defaulting to positive. Like, what is the positive out of this? And Churchill said it best, right? He says, never let a good tragedy go to waste. Because when you have life hit you, and like I said, yeah, I listened to a lot of Alan Watts, and he's a philosopher in the 70s, a brilliant guy. But none of us gets out of life unscathed. Like we all got to put our pants on. We all deal with death and loss and hardship. But you just choose. You have the choice either to default to positive or negative. And positive, I'm here as proof that it works. Yeah, it definitely works.
And I
That's
agree
what I was.
wholeheartedly. And that's what I'm trying to teach with the asset mindset. You are your greatest asset. Realize that, own your power. And until the next time, stay positive, people. God bless.